guys? Welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'll be continuing on with part 4 of the story about the 3 husbands that are joining forces after learning all their wives have been using girls' nights to have spicy adventures, and I'm putting that mildly. And where we left off earlier, the husbands all agreed that they're going to meet regularly 3 times a week to hit the gym together, have some drinks to make sure they don't stray off course, because already one of the husbands is feeling bad, saying misses his wife and all that. And we also heard the details from that one wife, Liv, who was the ringleader of everything. And now we're going to continue on with this saga and see where things go on, more revelations, where things are right now. And like I said, guys, this is quite the story. And of course, if you just found this video and you stumbled on this and you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, go back and watch part 1, 2, and 3. I guarantee you'll be quite entertained and learn a lot. Okay. Says here, I was surprised that it was Steve who was the first to confess to wanting his wife back. Smacks to Steve. I smacked him before and I'll smack him again. Don't start. That's crazy talk. We all know, Steve, that what Jessie was doing in that picture with that giant hot dog in her mouth in the bathroom. Let's not forget that. Every time you start missing Jessie, put that picture up on your phone. That'll change things real quick. Steve is a man's man. He's a big guy, tall, and his muscles have muscles. He got a full football scholarship to an Ivy League school. Played defensive end. He suggested we meet at the gym because he's always working out. Steve is a great guy. Funny, smart, and always there for his friends. He's a classic good guy that SSM talks about in his videos. Awesome. I mentioned this before, guys. I've known guys in my life. I can think of one in particular, very much a former friend of mine that has nothing to do with me now because of what I do on YouTube. And he is a guy's guy, a man's man on so many fronts. But when it comes to his wife, he is totally pee-whipped. I'm not saying Steve here is pee-whipped, but Steve is the nice guy in the element that she saw that she could pull her bullshit on. Steve is also very intimidating. Once when we were at the gym together, I went to spit in the water fountain. I spit a lot. When I got back, a guy was on the equipment I was using. My water bottle was still there as a placeholder for me. I was gone less than a minute, and I told the guy I was using the equipment. He said, I left. He's using it now. I have to wait. Not exactly gym etiquette. Yeah, it's amazing to me how some guys think they own equipment and own the gym. I've had many disputes with guys, both going to a gym and working at gyms as personal trainers. I was a nut about making sure there was order in the gym. That bullshit didn't happen. Anyway, he says, not exactly gym etiquette. I'm not going to get in a fight over equipment, but Steve came up, put his hand on my shoulder, and looked at the guy smiling. Steve didn't say a word. Steve was willing to get into a fight over someone's rudeness. Same here. The guy looked at Steve and got up. Said he's finished. The equipment is all mine. He walked away very quickly. Steve is the nicest, most decent, and generous guy. Just don't fuck with him or his friends. Good job, Steve. I'm still smacking you for saying you missed Jessie, but good for you. We agreed to meet 3 times a week to work out and talk. And we agreed to be available anytime if one of the other 2 needs us. We also need to watch SSM videos and discuss them. Yes, keep watching my stuff, guys. It will keep you strong. Our next support group was that Tuesday. When James and I arrived, Steve was already there. He was in a very good mood. He had a big bruise on his left cheek, and his knuckles were torn up and swollen. Oh, do tell. We asked what happened. He smiled and said, nothing happened. Where'd he get the bruises? Nowhere. I felt like I was talking to my 10-year-old son. James said we're leaving unless he tells us why his face and hands are bruised and swollen, and he said, okay, laughing. Here's what he told us. He's been thinking about the picture on Jessie's phone of her in the bathroom giving BJs to the 2 guys. There was a guy in the picture just taking a piss at the urinal. He's been thinking about that guy. I thought his wife is giving guys BJs, and he's thinking about the guy who's just trying to take a piss. Steve needs help. More than he can get from our support group. Steve continued that he's been wondering what the guy pissing thought about the unpleasant scene a few feet away. Did he want to finish and just get out of there? Did he want to join in? Did he want to stop them? Steve said the guy should have stopped them. If Steve was the guy pissing, there would not be a woman in the men's room. They certainly would not be doing what they were doing. Steve would stop it and throw them out. It didn't matter who the woman was. Steve looked at James and me and asked what we would have done if one of us was the guy taking a piss. We both shrugged. James said it was so ugly that he could not let it go. The 3 people involved were all equally to blame. He had no idea why Jessie or any woman would degrade herself like that. Because she liked being degraded. That's the point. She's one of those types. And remember, guys, she blamed being drunk. Hobag Handbook, Chapter 2. I was drunk! He didn't know what she was thinking, but he knew what the men were up to. Of course, they wanted to get off, but they also wanted to humiliate Jessie. Newsflash: Jessie wanted to be humiliated. It excited her. Guess what, guys? A lot of women like to be dominated, and dominated to a whole new level, being absolutely humiliated, have guys do the things I can't even mention on this channel, and I'm sure you guys can think about when I'm talking about this. Yes, many do like that. And nice guys aren't going to do those things to them. They took her picture to show people, to humiliate her. Steve was sure they had joked about their men's room adventure with Jessie, to humiliate her. Of course, Jessie should not have been in the men's room either. Steve said regardless of whether Jessie was drunk or not, willing or not, the two guys should never have brought a woman into the bathroom for SCX. They did not act properly. That offended Steve. This is what Steve was thinking when Jessie called him about Mr. BJ. Mr. BJ, the guy who texted Jessie a picture of her giving head in the bathroom, was supposed to see Jessie yesterday morning. Jessie told him that she didn't want to see him anymore, but Mr. BJ didn't care what Jessie wanted. He texted her early Monday morning that he was coming at 10 a.m. If she wasn't there, called the police, refused to let him in, he published the explicit pictures he had of her all over the internet. And then send the pictures to her husband. He'd find her parents and they'd get copies too. So yeah, he's the dominant and threatening her and all that she enjoys. But messing with the wrong guy. Jessie didn't respond but called Steve. What should she do? She didn't want to see this guy, but he had pictures of her. Steve asked her if she was crazy, allowing him to take pictures. Jessie said she was drunk. Of course, the excuse for everything. He and his friends kept pushing drinks on her. Steve told her to stop drinking. She said she has. Steve told Jessie he'd come by and talk to Mr. BJ. Don't respond to him or open the door. Don't let him in. Don't tell him that Steve was coming. Steve could work and said that he'd be late and headed for his house. He called Hector, a man in his 70s who lives next door. Hector is one-man neighborhood watch and self-proclaimed busybody. Steve said he and Hector do their lawns together. James and I knew that Steve mowed Hector's lawn while Hector watched and gave directions. Steve told Hector that there was a man coming to their house who was bothering Jessie. Do not approach the man. Steve was on his way. Hector should stay on his porch and watch. It didn't matter if the man knew Hector was watching him. When he gets there, call Steve and let him know. Hector asked if he should call the cops. Steve told Hector he wanted to talk to the guy first. After they talked, they'll probably need the police. Hector understood exactly what Steve was going to do. Hector told him he'd be watching. Steve could count on him. Hector called Steve when that guy arrived. What did he look like? Maybe 25, muscular like Steve, but not as big. He was dressed in a leather coat and jeans, a real sleazeball, a punk with a long greasy hair and dirty jeans. Hey, I wear black leather jackets and jeans. Of course, well, not anymore now that I live in Florida, but one day I will. Ain't all of us. He was pounding on Steve's door and yelling for Jessie. Steve told Hector again not to approach the guy. He was a minute or two away. When Steve pulled up, Hector was on Steve's porch arguing with the guy. The guy pushed Hector in the chest and Hector fell. He shoved the 70-something-year-old man. Oh, well, now Steve has even better excuse to defend the old guy and beat this guy into oblivion. Steve ran up, helped Hector up, and asked if he was okay. Hector said that this punk couldn't hurt him. Steve asked Hector to go back to his own porch. Hector, muttering under his breath, left Steve and Mr. BJ alone. Steve turned to Mr. BJ and asked what he wanted. Mr. BJ asked who was he. Mr. BJ was angry. Good. Steve didn't respond, but asked why Mr. BJ was here pushing around a guy in his 70s. Mr. BJ said the guy was bothering him. Now Steve, was bothering him. At Steve's house. Did he want the same? Steve said he doubted the guy would want to fight someone who's under 65 years old, or older than 10. The guy pushed Steve. Steve looked to make sure that Hector was watching. He was. Steve said he's not 75 or a 6-year-old girl. Mr. BJ is not going to fight Steve. This guy was embarrassing himself. Mr. BJ punched Steve in the side of his face. Steve took a step back and punched Mr. BJ in the face, hard. Mr. BJ staggered back. Steve punched him again. Mr. BJ went down. Steve pulled him up by his shirt and punched him again. The guy was still conscious. He told Mr. BJ that humiliating women by taking pictures of them when they were drunk and vulnerable is not something real men do. Well, yes, I agree with that. However, she wanted it. I don't care what she's saying. I don't believe anything any of these women say. Extorting the women by the SEX by threatening to publish her pictures is even worse. Steve pulled him up so their faces were inches apart. Steve told him that if he found out that he contacted Jesse again or that there were pictures of Jesse anywhere, he'll find him and cut off his package and stuff them down his throat. Man, I want to meet up with all you guys and have a beer. Did Mr. BJ understand this? Mr. BJ nodded. Steve said, say it. Mr. BJ said he'll never contact Jesse again and would destroy the pictures he had of her. Steve hit him again, breaking his jaw and knocking him out. Steve got up, yelled to Hector to call the cops. So I'm assuming you guys live in a place, a state, or a place where you could actually defend your property and defend yourself and beat the living crap out of some piece of scumbag on your property doing you wrong, and you're not going to be dragged away by the police. I'm assuming that. I'm now living in a state, I believe, that I could defend myself and my property and all that, because back in Massachusetts, fat freaking chance. Go Florida. When the police arrived, Mr. BJ was regaining consciousness. Hector was standing next to Steve. Steve's face was swelling. The cops separated Steve and Hector to interview them. Steve explained that he'd come home, found this guy pounding on the door, and asked what he wanted. The guy said that he was Steve's wife's lover and that he was there to see her. Steve told him he was Jesse's husband and asked him to leave. The guy refused to leave and punched Steve. Instead, Steve defended himself. Well, we all heard he defended himself. And by the way, we all know darn well he allowed that dumbass to punch him. Hector told the cops he came out of his house because the guy was on Steve's porch yelling and pounding on Steve's door. Steve walked up to him and the guy, and Steve they were talking when the guy just punched Steve out of the blue. Steve defended himself. Steve tried to get the guy to calm down, but the guy kept swinging at Steve. There was nothing else Steve could do. Any one of them would have done the same as Steve. When they finished the very short interviews, Steve and Hector were back on Steve's porch. The cops asked Steve if he was sure he had asked the guy to get off his property, and the guy refused. Steve said yes. Hector said he walked over before Steve arrived and also asked the guy to leave. The guy told Hector to F off, so Hector went back to his porch for safety. The guy seemed crazy. He was going to call the police when Steve pulled up. Mr. BJ had nothing to add to the conversation with the police. He couldn't talk. His jaw was broken. He was taken away by the ambulance. The cops asked Steve if the guy was going to tell a different story. Steve shrugged. The cops said it didn't matter what the guy said. Steve had a witness to it all. It sounded like Steve did everything he could to avoid the confrontation. He had to defend himself. Well, that's right. He had to defend himself. The cops asked Steve if he needed medical attention. Steve said he'll be all right. He wanted to see if his wife was okay. The cops said they had interviewed Jessie and asked her to wait inside. If Steve wanted to see her, it's best if one of the cops accompanied him. Steve said he already knew about his wife's cheating. He wasn't going to hurt her. But if they wanted to come with him, no problem. He opened the door and entered with one of the cops. A detective. Jesse was right inside the door. When the detective saw Jesse, his eyes widened. Jesse is a very, very good-looking woman. Jesse rushed to Steve to give him a hug. Steve held her off and asked her if she was okay. She nodded and asked what happened to Mr. BJ. Steve said he won't be bothering her anymore. Steve said she should pick better lovers. Jesse looked down. The detective asked Jesse if she invited Mr. BJ over. Jesse told the cops that she broke it off with him. He said he was coming to see her anyway. He told the cops she made it very clear to Mr. BJ that he was not welcome here. He should leave her alone. She did not want him to come and see her. She has text to Mr. BJ proving what she said. The cop then asked Steve if he was living here. Steve said no, they're separated. Strange question. The cop asked Jesse if one of the cops took her contact information, and Jesse nodded. Steve told the cop that he had to get to work. Can he leave? The cop said there was no reason to hold Steve, that Jesse told the guy that she didn't want him there, pretty much bottoms it up. Steve didn't have anything to worry about. If the guy makes a complaint, they'll need statements from Steve, Hector, and Jesse. But he, the cop, is going to the hospital now. Once he talks to the guy, he won't want to press charges against Steve. The detective smiled at Jesse. He told Steve he's free to go. He waited for Steve to leave. Steve stayed. Wow, this is well planned out. And good for you, Steve. Badass. The detective told Jesse if the guy bothers her again to call him. That'll be the last time he bothers anyone. He gave Jesse his card and said maybe he'll do some drive-bys to see if anybody's hanging around. Maybe knock on the door to see if she's okay or call to check in. Would she like that? Mr. Detective, I noticed you checking out Jesse here. Let's not get carried away now. I know he's doing his job, but it seems a little extra. I'll come check on you, you pretty little thing. Jesse certainly knows when a guy's hitting on her. Steve also knows when someone's hitting on Jesse. Jesse put on her sweet smile and said thanks, but the only man she wants knocking on her door calling her is her husband. There won't be anyone hanging around because she doesn't have any more boyfriends. The only man she wants is her husband. Yeah, blah, 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 whatever. Anything happens, she'll call her husband. He's the only one who can solve her problems. She handed the cop back his card and thanked him again. Steve told the cop he needed to speak to Jesse alone. The cop asked Jesse if she was okay. Jesse said that anything her husband wants is okay. The cop went back outside. Jesse asked Steve if she did the right thing. Would the cop take it out on Steve? Steve told her not to worry about it. She said she wants to make sure that Steve knew that she did nothing to encourage the cop. Steve said that he knew that. It wasn't his business anymore who she dated, but it was disrespectful of the cop to hit on Jesse in front of her husband, divorcing or not. He has to think about what to do about that. Disrespectful people should understand that downside of being disrespectful. Okay, Steve, do not get yourself freaking arrested and thrown in prison because you did some foolish things to a cop. Steve said the cop wanted to know if Steve lives there. Steve told him he didn't. The cop will be back. The cop understands that Jesse is. Steve paused looking for the right word, and then said the cop understands that Jesse is an SLUT. Jesse still told Steve those days are over. And don't worry about the cop bothering her. She called her mother this morning, and she's going to stay with her. Steve can have his house. She's leaving for her mother this afternoon unless Steve wants her to stay. Jesse looked at Steve hopefully. Steve said moving to her mother's was a good idea. Steve thanked her for leaving and asked Jesse to leave her house keys on the table by the door. Jesse was taken aback, but agreed. Yeah, get the fuck out. Jesse also said if it's okay with Steve, she was going to start full-time at the travel agency. She needs to do something. Yeah, she needs to work. She smiled at Steve and said, don't worry, there are no men working at the travel agency, only women. I want to put it past her next to start having flings with women just to get more attention and validation and all that. Jesse says she's never been with a woman. Uh-huh. She smiled, winked, and asked Steve if he'd be interested in a three-way with her and another woman. Oh my fucking God. Of course she said that. This goes to show. I tell you all the time, guys, the gals bring up open marriages and all that, and I say, believe me, no woman that truly loves their man would ever want another woman touching them, let alone looking at them. Well, I mean, looking at, let alone touching them. And she's offering a three-way. It's all transactional. Pair bonding is impossible for this woman. Steve said no thanks. Jesse said Steve had to do something she could use to blackmail him into loving her again. Steve said that's not going to happen. Jesse misinterpreted why he came here today. He wasn't there for Jesse. He came for Mr. BJ. He and Jesse were divorcing. Jesse needs to get a lawyer. Jesse started crying, and Steve left. Like, yeah, asshole, I wasn't here for you. Steve went out and thanked the cops for coming. The detective was still there. One of the cops thanked Steve for doing their job for them and patted him on the back. That's cool. Steve walked Hector back to his porch. He thanked Hector. Hector said if Steve hadn't kicked the guy's ass, Hector would have, and enjoyed it. Steve said next time he'll leave it up to Hector. He's glad Hector has his back. I'm picturing Hector kind of as this not as tough version of Clint Eastwood from Gran Torino. You all seen that movie? Get Off My Lawn? Yeah, that's going to be me when I'm old, except, well, I intend to have wealth when I'm old and live in a big property, so no motherfuckers can get on my lawn, but that's my goal. But anyhow, that would be me if I had a lawn for motherfuckers to get on when I'm an old man. Steve went out and thanked the cops. I read that part. Steve glanced back to his own porch. The detectives were knocking on his door, and Jesse answered. The cops put his hand on the door to keep it open. He was smiling. Jesse wasn't. The detective said something, and Jesse responded. The detective stopped smiling. Jesse tried to shut the door, but the cop held it open. Oh, my God. Jesse said something and stared at the arm holding the door open, waiting for him to move it. Another cop pulled the detective away. Jesse closed the door a little more forcefully than she needed to. The detective looked over at Steve on Hector's porch. Steve smiled at him. Oh, my God. Hector said he knows Steve and Jesse are having problems. He'll keep an eye on the house, make sure Jesse's okay. He thanked Hector again, but said Jesse's moving to her mother's. Steve's moving back in. Hector should come for dinner later this week. They set a day and time. Steve went to work. Well, good for you. Hang out with Hector. I like Hector, too. Steve looked at James and me and said he knows what we were thinking. He did this because he still loves Jessie, wants to save her and beat up all her lovers. Steve said that's not why he did it. That's not why he did it, guys. He did it to kick that guy's ass, and that guy deserved an ass whooping. That guy deserved way worse. I can't say way worse on this channel because I'd be demonetized. He would have done it for the same for anyone he knew who's taking advantage of a scumbag like Mr. BJ. People do foolish things. That doesn't give anyone the right to humiliate them and then threaten to expose them. Steve says he's no big hero, but Steve couldn't ignore the situation. That effing guy came to his house. And that guy's a scumbag and just in general, in principle, needs an ass kicking. But I'm still convinced, and I stand by this, that little Jessie liked that. She can play the victim here, but I'm buying this bullshit. Lots of women love to be dominated and some outright humiliated in such a way. Steve continued, Jessie's a horrible person who certainly deserves punishment. Karma will come for Jesse, but not in the form of Mr. BJ. Steve said it was his job to punish Mr. BJ, a guy who pursued, humiliated, and threatened a married gal, especially since the married gal was Steve's wife. Mr. BJ got what he deserved. If for nothing else, the guy needed a beatdown just for pushing Hector. Amen. Steve told James and me not to worry about him. He's not taking Jesse back. The woman he loves does not exist. He's divorcing the woman who does exist. He doesn't want her. Good. I knew he'd come to his senses. Maybe he knew I was going to smack him. I don't know. Then Steve smiled and asked if we had any idea about what to do about the cop who disrespected him by hitting on Jesse in front of Steve. The cop needed a lesson in respect. Whoa, hang on here, man. We both told him to leave the cop alone. Is he crazy? Steve smiled like he did at the guy who took my equipment at the gym. Probably the same smile he gave the cop when Jesse closed the door on him. Not a good sign. Steve's encounter with Mr. BJ certainly lived into our first support group session. And couldn't wait for the next one, but the next one was horrible. Oh, great. James, Steve, and I had the same divorce attorney. No, we didn't get a group rate, something that many who've commented on the last post were concerned about. From a lawyer? A group rate from a lawyer? Fat chance. When I met with the attorney, he asked how things were between Fran and me. Is Fran at the stage where she'll do anything to get me back, or at the last stage of every divorce where she wants everything I own and my whole salary too? I told him she says she'll do anything I ask of her. He said tell her to get an attorney and start thinking about a separation agreement. What am I looking at? He said this is a no-fault state. Oh, shit. That doesn't mean we can't bring up her adultery and just how horribly she's behaved. It's important for the custody part. Hell yeah. And how about she was doing it in your house where the kids are? Bring suspicion, the element of suspicion that maybe she did that when the kids were there. That could help. But divorces always come down to financial arrangements and what to do with the kids when there are kids. I'll end up paying alimony and she'll get some of my assets. If I want primary custody of the kids, regardless of what she says now, there will be a big fight. Prepare for that. But start talking about separation agreement with Fran. See what she wants. Let's try to get a signed agreement on the books. Press her to get an attorney. If that's her card to play to drag this out forever, she's going to do it. When I talked with James and Steve, they told me he told them pretty much the same. Steve will have the easiest, no kids, and they were only married for 6 years. But he won't get off completely. For me and James, the divorce will probably be a nightmare. Even if you get crucified, pull the nails out and you move on, okay? It's better than being with these scumbags. You guys are young. You're in your 30s. You're strong. You got each other's backs. You will prevail. And yes, you're going to be crucified, but you can pull the fucking nails out before you bleed to death. I know some people are going to be like, SSM, that's sacrilegious. Well, I ain't perfect. The following Tuesday, the one after Thanksgiving, we met at the gym to work out and talk. Our support session. James was despondent. I never see him looking so down. We started to do the bench presses when it was James's turn. He just sat down on the bench and stared into space. He looked like he was about to cry. I asked him what happened. He said he didn't want to work out, but he didn't know what else to do, so he came to the gym. Steve and I said we didn't want to work out either. Let's go talk. We left and sat in James's car. I asked James what had happened. He said he got the DNA tests back. Oh shit. Remember the beginning of the other story of part 3? And the guy mentioned about that? Here we go. Both James and I got DNA tests for our kids. I already had my results. James just got his. He wasn't going to show them to anyone, not even his attorney. He was going to put them away until his son was 18 years old. We are the only ones who know he even got the test done. Even the kids don't know. When he took the swabs, he told the kids their doctor wanted to test for a virus that was going around. That's actually believable nowadays. I have 2 boys, 10 and 8. I married Fran when she became pregnant with our oldest son. We were 22 years old. James is a boy, 12 years old, and a girl, 10. He married Liv when she became pregnant with the son. They were 20 years old. I mentioned earlier that James and I discussed whether to continue to include the DNA test at all in this update. We agreed that it was important. Was James ready to risk his wife and her attorney finding out that he was not his son's biological father? James said he didn't think Liv wanted custody. She was ready to abandon them in an instant to be with her lover. James said there wasn't much chance Liv would find out, and if she did, would use it to get custody. If I can't have custody of my own son because he's not really my son, why should I provide child support if he's not really my son? She can't have it both ways. Maybe she'd use the DNA to make James' life miserable, but he's willing to take that chance. He's been his son's father for 12 years. No one is going to take his son away. He wondered if Liv even knew who the real father was. That is terrible. This poor guy. I'm so sorry, man. And I might add, this child, the 12-year-old son, is the reason he married her in the first place, the baby trap. And this is why I tell you guys, remember he talked about wearing your protection, providing your protection, don't buying the bullshit they're on the pill. And also, paternity test, DNA test, if it's legal where you are. It's an unfortunate reality. Can you begin to imagine the storm, the worldwide storm that would happen if all of a sudden men out there all had their children DNA tested? Can you imagine? Oh my God. James said he's willing to share the DNA results if it helps people realize that cheating is not a one-time thing. The oops, I made a mistake, sorry it'll never happen again is all bullshit. Liv was cheating on him way back in college and probably continued to cheat the whole time they were together. As I say, gentlemen, all the time, once a cheater, always a cheater. He married his wife because she got pregnant. She baby-trapped him with another dude's baby. It never occurred to him that he was not the only one she was sleeping with. That was not his child. You were kids. 19 years old when you were together. 20 years old when you got married. Inexperienced. Well, let's see. We're going back 12 years. Yes, YouTube existed then, but certainly guys like me were on there, at least to my knowledge, talking about these things in great degree. And you were young and probably didn't have someone to tell you these things. But you guys can share your stories. And if there's any silver lining to this, you are doing a service to society, sharing these very humiliating adventures of yours that hopefully some guys can learn. So I salute you all for doing this. As I said, James read this before I sent it to SSM. So did Steve. They approved everything I've written here, including the results of James' DNA test. We spent a lot of time talking through this with James in his car that Tuesday. He will never get over the fact that he's not his son's biological father. He ended our session in his car by saying that the hits just keep on coming. What's next? I told him the bad news is over. The good news is that he's getting rid of his horror of a wife. Horse of a wife. We were all getting rid of our awful wives. That's something to celebrate. Let's get some beers. I think James felt a little better, but feeling better doesn't last very long for James, Steve, and me. Yeah, you guys are going to constantly feel like shit. You guys are going to have days when, and I'm sure this has already happened, you wake up and you feel this agonizing pain in your stomach. And of course you feel like you want to go to the bathroom and shit a Buick. And that's how bad your stomach's feeling. And you don't want to get out of bed. You just want to stay under the covers. You got to get out of bed. You got to go about your day. You got to go to your job. You got to take care of your kids. You got to keep going. You know, it's like Rocky, the movie Rocky Balboa. You all remember that scene when he talked to his son, and his son was bitching and complaining about he's making things difficult for him. And Rocky said, life ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It ain't how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. That's what something like that. That's what you guys got to do. That's what all you guys got to do when you're up against the shit that is called life at times. You have to keep moving forward. Otherwise, it will beat you down and the women will win. So, yes, there's going to be many, many tough days ahead, but you are all there together and you're going to make it. Anyway, go see Rocky Balboa. Fran's father called me a couple days. Here we go. Fran's father called me a couple days after Fran moved in with them. Both her parents have always treated me well, so I took his call. He apologized for his daughter's behavior and said he understands why I'm considering divorce. Well, thank you. He asked me how me and the kids are doing. I said reasonably well, but this was hard on all of us. He said he understood. What were the chances of me and Fran reconciling? Not a snowball chance in hell, Daddy-O. I said there's no chance that she and I will remain married. No chance that she and I will remain married. I just want the divorce to go smoothly without a lot of drama that will harm the children. He agreed, but suggested we try marriage counseling. I said that's not going to happen. He said I really should think about our marriage. I shouldn't make any rash decisions that were bad for the kids just because I'm hurting now. We all make mistakes. Mistakes? Here's a clue, Daddy-O. How about for 4 years your daughter, as far as I know, in those 4 years making that mistake? How about for 10 months she's been having an outright affair? How about all the things she's been doing and cheating and bringing guys in our house? You call that a mistake, you fucking jackass? I'm sure this guy's been cheated on. Give me a freaking break. And P.S., I guarantee you this guy has not been given the full story by his sweet little princess of a daughter. He says that with time, I'll forgive her. She saw this guy a couple times. She broke it off with him. She's learned her lesson. She doesn't love him. She loves me and wants to stay married. She won't be unfaithful again. He said I might want to look at things that might have driven her to go outside her marriage. Is this motherfucker actually trying to say it's your fault that maybe things you did caused you to do all this thing? Wrong thing to say to me. I asked if she really told him that she saw this guy only a few times. He said yes. Fran said it lasted only a couple of weeks. I told him she was seeing this guy for 10 months. She calls him Bob's big boy because she likes big dick. While she was seeing him, she was picking up guys in bars to hook up with. A few weeks ago, she F's 2 random guys she picked up for a dare. One after the other the same night. She's also been effing guys in my bed. She asked me for an open marriage because she was tired of sneaking around. She's been cheating on me for years. I said, I don't think marriage counseling is going to be much of a use. I need a divorce, and she needs to take a lot of cold showers or get a chastity belt. He asked if I was sure about this. I told him if he didn't believe me, call her best buddy Liv. She'll give him chapter and verse about the horse that he fathered. I told him I did look at the mistakes I made. I realize now that the big mistake I made was marrying his daughter, a disgraceful, disgusting piece of shit. We're all cheering now. He said he needs to go talk to his daughter. I told him to ask her about the night she danced around the bar with her dress up, pulled up to her waist, no underwear. He hung up. I will never talk to him again. Nope. You're never going to hear from him. I can't wait. I would love to hear that conversation with him and his little princess. That ends the update, SSM. Aw, I could read this shit all day. Of course, I'd lose my voice. If there's more to report, I'll write it up and send it to SSM. I want to thank you and your listeners again for all their help getting us through this. James, Steve, and I add their thanks. Keep up the good work. We need it. Holy Shit. Something tells me, guys, we're just getting started. So, guys, thank you very much for sending it in. I'm sorry for all the shit you're going through. I'm sorry. James, I think it's James. It's hard to keep track. I'm sorry you found out about your son not being yours. But you know what? At the end of the day, he's been your boy for 12 years. He's done nothing wrong. And I really hope things go the way, the right way. But anyhow, guys, like I said, it's going to get harder before it gets better. And you're going to wake up days you're not going to get out of bed, and your stomach is going to be in agony, and you'll be tempted to drink, you'll be tempted to eat a bunch of garbage, maybe drugs, gamble, all these vices to take your mind off things. Work together. You do your workouts, your gatherings 3 times a week, keep updates, keep each other strong, keep watching my videos or other content like that. Don't buy into the crying and begging and pleading and all change bullshit, all that hoe bag handbook crap, and you're going to be okay. It will get better in time, but stay strong for your kids. Your kids need you, okay? You, as men, set the example. The kids see you strong and calm and control, then they'll be calm and control. If they see you losing it and breaking down, then they're going to lose it and breaking down. Is that unfair? You bet your fucking ass. It ain't easy to be men, but you can do it. And you got a whole army of dudes all over the world that are watching this that are cheering you on. And your struggles and your successes and everything you go through will help other guys that are going through this bullshit in one form or another right now, or if they watch this video in a year, have the strength to carry on to the next day. At the end of the day, you take it one day at a time. You're going to be all right. And I know you guys are going to get butchered in the divorce, especially you guys that have children and have been married for a lot longer, So be it. You'll survive, okay? You'll make it. And then you never, ever, ever, ever get married again. Hell, even think about relationships. And you use all the things you've learned from my channel and other channels, because I'm not the only game in town. There's other great content creators. Hopefully they're not all being picked off by YouTube. That can help you. And you go from there. And you'll raise your kids right, and everything's going to be all right. And remember, you guys are on the right side of 30. Your very soon-to-be exes are on the wrong side. And their days of getting attention and validation are very soon to be over, because nature will take its course. But anyhow, guys, as you guys have more good updates, send them in. Now, I don't need to hear any more details at this point about the graphic details of what those girls were doing on that night and lifting their skirts. I don't want to hear more of that shit. At this point, we get the point. I now want to hear details, if you're going to share your story, of course, about what's going on with the lawyer, the divorce, the begging and pleading to come back, all that. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear more goddamn details about BJ's in the bathrooms and her getting wet on the dance floor. You get my point. We've heard enough, and I don't need to have the video taken down. So I wish you the best, and I'll be keeping an eye out for any updates. All right, and by the way, guys, you want to hear updates? Let these guys know. All right, guys, that is it for today. Be sure to comment down below, and be sure to like the video, share with your friends, and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.